The attempt to sell the East Container Terminal of the Colombo port is still in the works. Tonight, we have Newsfirst Charlene Benedict and Asoka Dias to tell us more on this from close proximity to the Colombo port.
I'm coming to you from close to the premises of the Colombo port. Now, as you can see behind me, the operations of the Colombo port are ongoing. Needless to say, the Colombo port is an important asset for Sri Lanka, a national asset of Sri Lanka, if you will. But how is the current administration of the country managing this national asset? We have continued to report on a number of irregularities at the Colombo port and a number of mismanagements at the Colombo port. Joining us with a number of other revelations today is senior journalist Asoka Dias. Asoka, what's wrong with the Colombo port this time around?
We have three terminals operating at present in Colombo port, and fourth one, the eastern terminal. It is a matter of purchasing the gantries for the terminal and install them. That is, it is costed for $190 million. And I mean, aren't we a country who can't afford $190 million?
But now what's proposed is for the eastern terminal to be developed as a joint venture between India, Japan and Sri Lanka. Of course, ministers of this government of good governance itself, namely Minister Arjun Ranatunga and Mahinda Samarasinghe, both former ministers of ports and shipping, came out and said that Sri Lanka alone can develop the eastern terminal of the Colombo port.
On top of that, His Excellency the President Maithripala Sirisena very clearly said Sri Lanka should discuss this, understand this, and then take a decision without rushing into a decision and inviting outside partners to invest and be partners of this Colombo port eastern terminal.
Now, what more to say? After these ministers came out and made these statements, the eastern terminal of the Colombo port is a potential terminal that can bring in massive amounts of foreign revenue into the country, much needed foreign revenue into Sri Lanka. But the proposal now is to hand this over to a joint venture between India, Japan and Sri Lanka. But the problem lies therein. India, Japan and these countries are competitors to Sri Lanka when it comes to managing of ports.
And on top of that, we have the experience of what happened in the Hambantota port. When ports are, investors come from away from Sri Lanka, they look at to get the maximum benefit out of their investment. And they would on paper say that, okay, Sri Lanka will be given 51% of the stake of the investment. But technically, that is true. But practically, what we get is not the lion's share. Or practically, what we don't get is the opportunity to reap the benefits. They will give us the, section of supplies.
Yes, which is exactly what happened in the Hambantota port. We were handed over the service division to pick out the garbage, to provide cleaning services, to provide electricity, to provide water. But the profitable operations of the Hambantota port are all run by foreign companies. This is the same fate of the eastern terminal.
Trade unions of the port services, Colombo port, are complaining on this, and they continue to agitate that this is not a wise move to bring in countries away from, countries China, Japan, India, to invest in at this juncture at our key terminal, the eastern terminal of the Colombo port.
Also, India is currently on the path of developing new ports surrounding Sri Lanka, container terminals. These are similar to the eastern terminal in the Colombo port. Of course, we have the new proposed container terminal that is about to come up in the islands of Andaman, and many other ports that surround Sri Lanka. So technically, the Sri Lankan government, in this case Minister Sagala Ratnayaka, who is the current Minister of Ports and Shipping, is planning on handing out the eastern terminal of the Colombo port, one of the most profitable terminals of the Colombo port, to technically a competitor of Sri Lanka. What's the guarantee that these people can give that they will indeed develop this port?
And in this whole proposal, it says that Sri Lanka will raise $190 million and then later will get it reimbursed by a loan financial facility provided by Japan. If we can raise 190 million, why are we going for another, facility later in the day and then give a stake in one of our key economic hubs.
But Ashoka, that is just one side of the irregularities and mismanagement at the Colombo port. Another is that the same Minister of Ports and Shippings, Minister Sagala Ratnayaka, has recruited 450 new employees. What is the issue surrounding that?
Now, we all know we are very close to the election. Presidential, general, provincial council, they name, everything is around the corner. And at this juncture, 450 people, the trade unions allege that new employment opportunities are offered, especially to people from the particular minister's constituency.
Okay, right. So these it must be noted that these individuals who are employed or recruited for these ports operations are not skilled employees.
And the trade unions continue to say that the government officers who were in charge of this recruitment, they didn't want to do it because they understand the sensitivity and the gravity of this.
Because there was a chief financial officer who was initially vested with the duty of paying the salaries of these employees. Now, since the finance ministry rejected the payment of these salaries, there was pressure mounting on this chief financial officer to pay the salaries of these employees. But when it came to a breaking point, this chief financial officer went overseas.
And his deputy also, did not want to get in and burn his or her fingers.
And now we've got an audit officer or an officer from a completely another field who has been imported, if you will, and put in that position and now forced to find a way to pay the salaries of these employees who have been recruited in contingent ways.
During the election times, doing certain things, we have seen this before in 2014-15, and the senior most government officer, the secretary to the president, was inquired and he was found guilty, and it is at present he is on appeal.
Yes.
But it is important to mention that people, the government officers who are paid by the people of this country, if they do wrong, then they are duty bound and they will be brought to books in a future government or a future investigations. Now, this is a thing that the government officers as well as the ministers has to keep in mind.
But at the end of the day, what is important is that if these government officers, responsible government officers, I mentioned the word responsible because they are responsible for their actions. They cannot simply go scot-free by saying in court or pleading in court that this was the minister's instructions. Following illegal instructions is an offense in Sri Lanka, and they will be brought to court if these matters are of course done illegally.
Shalan, and another very important point is Sri Lanka's territorial waters. In 2010, immediately after the war with the LTTE, Sri Lankan government placed a claim officially and legally through United Nations to enhance our exclusive economic zone, which is now 200 nautical miles, to expand it to 800 nautical miles south of Sri Lanka, and claim the Bay of Bengal, which has, scientifically proven lot of mineral deposits, gas deposits, and various other resources, and it is important for the national security as well for us to get our resources.
The territorial integrity of Sri Lanka. Of course, though we say Sri Lanka is situated in the Indian Ocean, these are technically Sri Lankan waters. It should be called the Sri Lankan Ocean for all that matters.
And even in the map it says Ceylon Plain in the map, but we continue to say Indian Ocean. What is the logic?
Of course, the officials, instead of trying to sell off national resources like the eastern terminal of the Colombo port and start venturing on illegal recruitments during a run-up to a presidential election, should focus more on pursuing the true needs of the country.
And in India, they change names, Chennai, Bombay.
Exactly. Those are the names that were given during the Britishers, but they stamped their own identity on it.
Now we should push to change the name. I mean, Ceylon Plain. I mean, why can't we claim to, you know, rename it as
Ceylon Plain.
Sri Lanka Plain?
Exactly. It's these kind of actions that really can bring about the territorial integrity and the geopolitical advantage in this region towards Sri Lanka. It's not by selling off national assets such
And
as
especially
the
at a time where India is investing heavily on Andaman and Nicobar Islands. They are building a new port,
a container terminal.
And in Tuticorin they are having a new container terminal.
In Cochin.
So, I mean, around Sri Lanka they are investing, and if we get them as a partner, will they really allow us to blossom? Will they really allow Sri Lanka's terminal to blossom?
India has their own homegrown plan of bringing their nation to the top of the food chain. China has the One Road, One Belt initiative, which is aimed at their economic prosperity. Japan has their own plans for the economic prosperity of their country. But what are the plans that Sri Lanka has? Selling off national assets to different countries so that they can further their interests. Is this how we truly plan on moving forward? The question is left to the responsible authorities of Sri Lanka.